It began in the dead of winter, 2011. A gray chill crawled through the decaying streets of Gary, Indiana. An old steel town long forgotten by time, worn down by poverty, rust, and silence. But on the corner of Carolina Street, one house was anything but quiet. 3860 Carolina Street. A modest two-story rental, peeling paint, a sagging porch. Just another skeleton on a block of the dead. But inside, something was breathing. LaToya Ammons moved in with her 3 children and her mother, Rosa. They didn't know they were stepping into a nightmare. They thought they were moving into a home. What they found was something ancient, watching them, waiting. It started small, like all hauntings do. The porch lights flickered, despite the dead of winter and no power to them. Footsteps whispered from the upper floor when no one was there. Doors creaked open slowly, like they were sighing. And the children, they said the shadows in the living room moved. Each night the house grew colder. The children wouldn't sleep. The youngest boy said a tall man with red glowing eyes came into his room after dark. It told him things, horrible things, and told him to keep quiet. And then, one by one, the children began to change. They'd stare blankly at walls for hours, whispering to things that weren't there. They spoke in voices too deep for their small lungs. Their laughter turned cruel. Their eyes turned wild. And then came the crawling. The 9-year-old began to convulse. He bared his teeth at his grandmother, growling. Then, without warning, he leaned back and walked up a wall, backwards, across the ceiling. No wires, no supports. He twisted his neck to stare upside down at a stunned caseworker and nurse, both professionals who screamed and fled. This wasn't folklore. This wasn't a dream. It was written into official medical reports. The Ammons family home had become a hellmouth. Desperate, LaToya called spiritual healers. They came, and they ran. The ones who stayed said the home was infested by more than 200 demons. They told her to anoint the doorways with olive oil, draw crosses in salt, and burn sage. She tried. She prayed. But the house only got louder. One night, her daughter was yanked by an unseen hand, thrown across the bathroom. Her head cracked the sink. Blood painted the tiles. She needed stitches. Another night, the girl woke up clawing at her own throat. She gasped and cried through tears. "It's choking me," I heard it say. "I'll never see you again." Then came the possession. Not stories, not suggestions. Full possession. The children's bodies would jerk violently. Their eyes rolled back. They howled in voices that weren't theirs. Strangers witnessed it. Neighbors, friends, caseworkers. One described seeing evil grins stretch across the kids' faces as their voices dropped to a growl that didn't belong in this world. Even LaToya herself began to change. She would black out, then wake up hours later, having no memory of speaking in a deep male voice, screaming blasphemies, her face twisted into a cruel snare. People said she was no longer alone in her skin. Finally, the state intervened. Child Protective Services took the kids. Not because of drugs, not because of abuse, because of something they couldn't explain. And then came Captain Charles Austin, a hardened Indiana police officer known for keeping his cool. He was a skeptic, until the house opened its eyes. His recording equipment failed the second he stepped inside. The air was heavy, like breathing through water. He heard footsteps in the attic, though it was empty. And in the basement, he swore he heard something breathing right beside him. He would later tell reporters, "I don't believe in ghosts, but what I saw in that house scared me. I was terrified." The final act came when a hospital chaplain reached out to the church. Enter Father Michael Maginot, a Catholic priest. He spent 6 months performing a full exorcism on the family. Holy water hissed against the walls. The prayers drew screams from the floors. Latoya writhed as if her body was trying to rip itself apart. The house shook. The priest claimed, "There are more than 200 demons in this home. It is cursed. It is claimed." During the final rite, a black mass rose from the floor and vanished. The walls bled oil. And then, silence. The family fled. They left the home, never to return. To this day, the house remains vacant, boarded up, rotting, but it still draws attention. Years later, an officer patrolling Carolina Street took a photo of the porch. In the image, a figure, tall, black, standing in the window. But the house was empty. This isn't folklore. The Ammons case has been covered by the Indianapolis Star, documented by social workers, doctors, police, and priests. Even now, it's considered one of the most credible cases of real-life demonic possession ever recorded. 3,860. Carolina Street isn't just a haunted house. It's a wound in the earth, something raw and bleeding. And if you ever walk by that porch, listen. You just might hear something still breathing inside. In the holy village of El Rocio, where pilgrims walk barefoot in devotion and the wind carries hymns through empty alleyways, something unholy stirred in a quiet home nestled just beyond the marshes. A modest cottage, white walls, red tile roof, and a rusting satellite dish became the stage for something the locals now whisper about in prayer. It began with something so mundane it was almost forgettable. Every night, at exactly 10:37 p.m., the family's television, an old flat screen in the living room, shut off. Not a power surge, not a glitch. It simply died. The screen blinked to black in an instant, as if snuffed out by an unseen hand. The room would fall cold. Still, as though something ancient was watching. At first, Lucia Marquez, the mother, assumed it was bad wiring. Her husband had passed 2 years ago, and she'd been raising her 2 children alone. She made a mental note to call an electrician, but the next night, the TV did it again, 10:37 p.m. The night after that, again and again. The 4th night, she stood in front of the TV, remote in hand, staring at the digits on the microwave clock. 10:36, 10:37. Click. Silence. The screen vanished. Black. Dead. She hadn't even touched the remote. From the hallway, her son Mario, just 6 years old, called out in a sleepy voice, "He's here again, Mama." Lucia rushed to him. "Who?" she asked, brushing the hair from his eyes. "The old man," Mario whispered. "He's sitting on the couch. He watches with me." She felt a chill deep in her chest, not in her skin, but in her bones. A tremor of something unseen, something familiar. That night she couldn't sleep. The house moaned. Shadows shifted in the corners. Her daughter, Alba, found the crucifix above her bed turned upside down the next morning. The silver chain still intact, no signs of tampering. Then the mug moved. She watched it, her morning coffee, slide slowly across the table without anyone near it. She didn't scream, she didn't blink. She only heard her father's voice in her mind. A whisper. "Don't be afraid of things you can't see, Lucia. Only things that lie." Her father, Ramon, had been a gentleman, but firm, protective, a creature of ritual. He had died of a stroke while watching his beloved football game, alone on that same old couch at night. After that, the disturbances became personal. Footsteps in the hallway, the smell of tobacco, her father's brand, lingering by the door. The television screen, once dead, now flashed images for brief moments during its shutdown. Static, then faces, blurred but eerily familiar. Sometimes, voices echoed in the silence, like radio static trying to form words. One night, Lucia returned home late from a shift at the hospital. The kids were with their aunt. The house was empty. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and turned the TV on. She stared at the screen. The home video began playing on its own. It was a recording from 2019, just months before her father's death. A barbecue. Ramon stood near the grill laughing, lifting Mario in his arms. Lucia didn't press play. She hadn't even selected that file. 10:36 p.m. Her breath caught, her skin prickled. 10:37. The screen shut off. And in its reflection on the black glass, he appeared. Ramon, sitting on the other side of the couch. His face was pale, drained, not warm like in life. His eyes locked with hers, deep, dark, unblinking. He raised his hand and pointed toward the hallway. Lucia turned her head, nothing there. When she looked back at the TV, he was gone. But in her lap, where nothing had been seconds before, lay the rosary from her bedroom. The next day, Mario refused to go back to school. He had woken up in tears. "Abuelo was in my room," he said. "He sat on the edge of the bed. He told me, 'I'm proud of you. I'm going to look after you.' That's what he always said when I got good grades." "It was him, Mama. It was him." Lucia collapsed into the kitchen chair. "That's what he said to you every time he tucked you in," she murmured. "That's exactly what he used to say." A paranormal research team from Seville came at her request. They arrived with gadgets, meters, infrared cameras. The team laughed politely at first, until the EMF reader maxed out in front of the television exactly at 10:37 p.m., despite no running electronics, no current, no wires. They reviewed thermal footage taken in the hallway. In one frame, just one, a human-shaped heat signature sat on the couch, but no one had been there. The final moment, the moment that made Lucia lock the children's bedroom at night, came a week later. The children were asleep. She sat alone, reading in bed. Rain drizzled softly outside. The temperature dropped. A gust of wind rattled the window, though it was sealed tight. She rose to check it. The glass was misted over. She froze, written in the fog. A name, traced in a familiar, deliberate hand. Ramon. No sound, no light, until the TV in the living room suddenly turned on by itself, blasting static. Lucia ran to it. As she reached for the remote, the static changed. A face appeared again, his face. But this time he looked different, sunken, hollow. He whispered something, barely audible under the hiss. "Let me in." The family still lives in the house. The television still shuts off every night without exception at 10:37. But now, there are rumors. A neighbor's child, passing by at night, claimed he saw someone waving through the window, an old man, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Others say the cottage is cursed. Lucia no longer tries to explain it. She simply says, he came back. Not to hurt us, but to stay. Maybe death didn't take all of him. And if you're in El Rocio and find yourself near that quiet cottage after dark, don't look through the window at 10:37. You might see someone staring back. There are places where time doesn't just linger, it festers. In the heart of rural Michigan, far from city lights and swallowed by pine-dark woods, stands a house the wind never forgets. The Mecosta County Historical Museum, once a humble 1880s family home, now squats like a dying relic at the edge of big rapids. In the fall, its silhouette is a black wound against a blood-orange sky, and locals speak of it only in hushed voices once the sun goes down. They used to laugh about the story of Abigail. They don't anymore. October 2022. The trees were already bare, their bony limbs rattling against one another in the wind. That's when Logan Aldrich, a 17-year-old senior at a nearby high school, decided to do more than just listen to ghost stories. He wanted to find one. For years, the museum had told children about Abigail, a young woman betrayed by a lover who supposedly flung herself from the second-floor landing in despair. It was a tale whispered during field trips to make history more fun. But Logan wanted to know what was real. With 2 friends and the blessing of Museum Vice President Julie Cole, he returned to the museum after dark. Not for a tour, for a hunt. They brought ghost hunting gear, a spirit box that scanned radio frequencies in erratic bursts, and a hand crank flashlight, a tool often used in paranormal investigations for its simplicity. They also carried EMF detectors, audio recorders, and enough youthful arrogance to believe they were ready for what was waiting. They were wrong. Abigail's bedroom, 10:17 p.m. The room was still, too still. Old wallpaper, discolored and peeling, seemed to curl inward toward them like it wanted to listen. A brass bed sat like a tomb beneath a dust-laced window. No traffic sounds, no night birds, just silence and breath. Logan placed the flashlight on the floor in full view. It wasn't turned on. He spoke, his voice steady. "Is anyone here with us tonight?" Click. The flashlight turned on. The room froze. For 3 full seconds, no one breathed. Logan's friend, pale and wide-eyed, whispered, Did you touch it?" "No," Logan said, louder now. "If you're here, turn it off." Click. Darkness returned. Then again. "Did you die in this room?" Click. On. "Are you angry?" Silence. Then, click. Off. And then, the laughing started. Not out loud, not in the room. It came through the spirit box, a fractured, broken static, and within it, a giggling female voice, not amused, not playful, mocking. Julie Cole, present and visibly shaken, whispered, "That's not the story we tell kids." Something was wrong, terribly wrong. 10:41 p.m. The group split up. Julie and Logan's team took the stairwell, retracing Abigail's supposed final steps. The others returned to the landing. They were barely apart for a minute when it happened. Bang! A violent, concussive slam echoed from upstairs. The walls trembled. Plaster cracked. One of the girls screamed. They turned to run, and that's when they saw it. A wooden rocking chair, antique, unmoved for years, was sliding across the hallway floor. Not rocking, gliding. It passed the bedroom doorway like it was on ice. Its movement slow and deliberate, unnatural. No slope, no wind, no one near it. An EMF reader in Julie's hand spiked, red lights flaring as if a storm had detonated inside the house. "It was like something shoved through us," she later said. "And that chair just moved, like it was being pushed by a hand we couldn't see." Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually. Suddenly, breath fogged in front of their mouths. The smell of iron and smoke, like scorched blood, crept into their noses. One teen began to gag. Another fell to their knees, unable to move. Something was in the house with them. Something that had been woken. The photos. Logan had taken pictures earlier that day for documentation. Bright, uneventful. Sunlight through windows, empty rooms. But reviewing them later revealed something else. In 2 separate frames, barely visible in the light, a blurred silhouette of a woman at the bedroom window. Long, dark dress. Head turned. No features. Another on the landing, facing downward, her hands pressed to the railing. Watching. Waiting. Julie confirmed no one had been there. "It's not a trick of light," she insisted. "Those were figures, human shapes. They weren't there when the photo was taken." And there was one final image, blurred and shaky, taken just after the loud bang. The rocking chair, moving on its own. The aftermath. The museum board convened. Some wanted to bury the story. Others, horrified, couldn't ignore what they saw, what they felt. The legend of Abigail had been made up, A story for school tours, a lie. But now the lie had a voice that giggled from radio static, a voice that moved chairs and triggered EMF readings and answered questions no human could. A voice that might have been waiting in silence for decades, until someone finally listened. "We created Abigail," Julie Cole later told Big Rapids News. "We invented her for the kids, but something was there that night. Something answered. Something watched us." Locals now whisper of other things. Locked doors found open in the morning, shadows flitting across security camera footage. Visitors feeling unseen fingers graze the backs of their necks. The museum remains open, but few enter alone. And the bedroom upstairs, the one that once only held a story, now it holds something else. So if you ever find yourself in Big Rapids walking past that old clapboard house, listen. You might hear a creak, a bang, or the soft, slow scrape of a rocking chair, moving just for you. In the heavy breath of Alaskan summer, when the sun never fully sets and the land hums with the silence of ancient things, 3 seasoned backcountry hikers stepped into the wild. Jacob Miles, a 34-year-old ex-military survivalist with 800 logged miles in extreme terrains. Alina Hart, 29, a wilderness photographer with a deep love for forgotten places. And Ethan Roach, 31, a geology grad student, quiet but clever. The kind of man who studied rocks but believed in ghosts. Together, they set out to explore a stretch of interior Alaska that locals only ever called Devil's Nest. It wasn't on most maps. Just a crooked, horseshoe-shaped valley veiled in old-growth spruce and low permafrost mist. The kind of place where the forest pressed in too tight. Locals called it Badland. Not cursed, not haunted, just wrong. Radios died there. GPS devices froze. The few who hiked through often returned quiet, changed, or not at all. But Jacob had planned everything. 5-day loop, military-grade satellite phones, flare guns, redundant maps and compass backups. They'd filed their route with park services and left nothing to chance. But chance had nothing to do with what waited there. Day 1 was uneventful. They made solid ground, climbed into the lower ridges, and even joked about the devil name. The terrain was beautiful, eerily untouched. No sign of animals, no bird song. Just the crunch of boots on dry pine needles and a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt like it was listening. Day 2, Alina snapped a photo of something strange. A tree, maybe 50 feet tall, stripped entirely of bark, standing white and raw like bone in the center of a dense grove. Around it, the earth was scorched in a perfect circle. Not fresh, but old. Forgotten. She mentioned the tree that night over the fire. Ethan went pale. Said he'd seen something like it in an old Tlingit myth. A calling tree. A marker, maybe. Or a warning. Jacob brushed it off. That night they heard singing, not far off. A woman's voice. Soft, drifting, wordless. An old tune full of sorrow. Melancholy. At first they thought it was another group. But there were no other parties on the registry. They called out. No answer. The woods remained still. Jacob circled the camp twice, rifle in hand. Nothing, and yet the fire flickered oddly all night. The flame bending sideways as if pushed by wind none of them could feel. At one point, Alina gasped, eyes locked to the trees. She swore she saw someone. Pale, tall, moving, not walking, gliding between the trunks, eyes like glass, just for a moment. Jacob didn't sleep that night. Day 3, things began to unravel. When they returned to their camp after scouting a nearby ridge, they found it in ruins. Tents ripped open from the inside out. Supplies scattered. Food untouched. The fire pit cold despite having been active only an hour prior. No signs of struggle, no tracks, not even their own. Jacob tried the sat phone. Dead. Ethan's compass spun lazily. Their GPS showed the same coordinates no matter where they went, as if the entire valley had collapsed in on itself. They tried navigating by the sun, but the light bent strangely through the mist. No shadows fell straight. Every path they took circled back. That night, the voice came again. Closer now. Not singing, but whispering. "Come home," it said. A woman's voice just beyond the light. "You've been gone too long." Jacob fired a warning shot into the trees. The forest swallowed the sound. No echo. No birds fled. Nothing moved. At dawn, Ethan was gone. No scream in the night, no rustling, no struggle. Just gone. His pack sat neatly by the cold fire pit, zipped shut, his boots missing, his journal left open on a nearby rock. The last thing he'd written, "It's inside the trees. I think it knows my name." Jacob and Alina scoured the area for hours. No drag marks, no blood. The only sign was a single set of bare footprints, deep and dark, leading into the thickest part of the woods, and ending abruptly after 10 paces. They had no choice but to keep moving. Day 4, they no longer spoke. Jacob had gone cold, mechanical. Alina was shaken, slow, her eyes darting to every sound. They had stopped using names, afraid to hear them repeated. That night, the voice returned, but it wasn't her anymore. It was Ethan. "Alina," it whispered. "Jake, I'm just ahead. You can find me. I'm not alone." The voice came from all sides, behind trees, under rocks, above them in the canopy. A chorus of Ethan's voice, twisted, slightly too fast, slightly too wet. They huddled by the fire, but the flame sputtered. Cold crept in. Unnatural. Bone deep. Snowflakes fell through the forecast, had promised clear skies. Something moved in the distance, too tall to be a man, too quiet to be a beast. They saw the calling tree again, only this time, it wasn't alone. Figures stood beneath it, motionless, watching. Day 5. Alina woke up alone. No Jacob. No gear. Just the remnants of the camp, and Ethan's jacket wrapped around her shoulders, though she didn't remember putting it on. She walked for what felt like days, hearing voices in every stream, every creaking branch, every gust through the trees. When the bush pilot found her 10 days later, standing barefoot in the middle of a gravel bar, arms limp at her sides, she was unresponsive, wrapped in Ethan's jacket, frostbitten, eyes glazed over. She was murmuring a lullaby in a language no one could place. She never said what happened, never spoke of the woods again. Today, Devil's Nest is marked as restricted land. Environmental instability, the signs say. But the rangers know better. Some have heard it too. The singing, the voice that knows your name, the one that sounds like a friend who's been dead for years. So if you ever wander too far north, and the woods go too quiet, and something starts to sing, don't listen, don't answer, and never follow the voice. Late October 2021. Monongahela National Forest, West Virginia. By late October, the highlands of Monongahela go quiet, not peaceful, dead. The kind of silence that makes your eardrums ring. The kind that convinces your ancient instincts that something is watching and waiting. Chris Weller was no rookie. He'd hiked nearly every major backwoods trail in the eastern United States. A soloist by nature, Chris found serenity in isolation. Nature, he said, was the one place where you could truly hear yourself. But on October 21st, 2021, Chris entered a stretch of wilderness that doesn't like to be listened to. Black Hollow Trail. 18 miles of winding switchbacks, crumbling ridgelines, forgotten ranger posts, and a canopy so thick it steals daylight by noon. They say the trail got its name because even in full sun, it feels like twilight. Locals just call it the Echo Trail, and not fondly. Day 1, footsteps in the moss. Chris's final trip started like any other. GPS tracking on, GoPro strapped to his chest. His first video log was upbeat. Mid-50s today, trees are fire bright. Haven't seen a single soul out here, just the way I like it. Black Hollow's got a weird vibe though. I don't know. Feels like the trees are leaning in. His last known position was logged near mile marker 7, a ridgeline clearing used by old forest rangers back in the 60s. He pitched camp, made a fire, and filmed himself reading from a paperback. But if you watch the footage closely, around minute 4, you see something in the tree line behind him, barely visible, a pale face, watching. It vanishes when he turns. Day 2. Something in the dark. Chris's satellite tracker shows strange behavior the following day. He veers off course, makes 2 full circles within a 2-mile radius. His journal entries grow erratic. Heard a voice in the woods last night. Thought it was a person, but it was me. Or something trying to sound like me. Found footprints, same boots as mine, but I've only walked here once. Trees are whispering, not the wind. Not squirrels, whispers. Real ones, that was his last written note, on a damp, torn page near the back of his waterproof journal. Just below the rest, in hard, frantic pencil strokes, it mimics me. The encounter, Grace Layton. 2 days before Chris's disappearance, another hiker, Grace Layton, came forward with a story that shattered the search narrative. She'd been section hiking near the southern bend of Black Hollow. Fog had rolled in thick as milk, reducing visibility to almost nothing. That's when she saw a man walking barefoot down the trail. He was limping, head cocked at an unnatural angle, arms loose at his sides like they'd been detached and sloppily reattached. He didn't blink, didn't speak, until she said, "Sir, are you all right?" His head twitched. His mouth moved like it was trying to remember how to be a mouth. Then, flat as granite, "Don't look behind you." She didn't. She ran until her lungs bled. Search and rescue. Something is calling. Rescue teams reached Chris's last GPS ping on October the 27th. What they found was wrong. His tent was intact, neatly staked. The flap was open, unzipped. His boots were inside, his pack untouched. Even his food, still vacuum sealed. No blood, no tracks, no signs of struggle, just absence, like he'd been plucked from the world. Then came the screams. The first night in the search grid, 3 rangers reported hearing a sound they described as not human, but trying. It started as a low moan, rising into a piercing shriek that cracked like glass through the woods. Branches shook, leaves fell, animals bolted. But the most disturbing part? The screams were in Chris's voice, except wrong, slurred, like a puppet trying to remember how to scream, like it had too many lungs. The GoPro. Final recording. On October 30th, a SAR volunteer spotted something reflecting in a tree hollow. A GoPro still strapped to a twisted piece of paracord, half buried in lichen. The last video file was 11 minutes long, time-stamped 2 days after Chris went missing. It opens with him building camp again, breathing hard, eyes wide with paranoia. Something's out here. I saw it. Looks like me. Walks like me. But it's not right. It won't speak unless I do. It follows. It learns. Then he freezes. Looks to his right. Off camera, a voice says. His own voice. Perfect. You shouldn't be here. He screams. The camera tumbles. You see nothing but dirt and pine needles. But the audio keeps going. Chris is crying now, whispering over and over, "It's me. It's me. It's me. It's me. Then a heavy rustling. Something large. Wet-sounding footsteps. Then silence. Until a second voice, identical to the first, whispers, "You came alone. You left yourself." And finally, in the last 5 seconds, a sound that defies description. A laugh, high-pitched, echoing, giddy like a child watching something die. Then, static. Epilogue. The trail that keeps you. Chris Weller was never found. No trace, no body, no answers. But he's still seen. Hikers claim they've spotted him in the woods, barefoot, slack-jawed, always just behind a tree. Sometimes he warns people to leave. Sometimes he just watches. Locals avoid Black Hollow now. They say the forest keeps a copy of every hiker who dies or disappears inside it. Not a ghost, not a spirit. A version, empty-eyed, hungry to be real. They call it Echo Trail because it doesn't just echo your footsteps. It echoes you. And if you ever hear your own voice coming from somewhere in the trees, run, because something is trying to become you. And in those woods, one of you has to go. The winter of 2015 was brutal in Wyoming. Temperatures plummeted below zero every night, and the Wind River Range was buried beneath a thick crust of snow and silence. It wasn't a place for the casual hiker that time of year, but that didn't stop Tyler, Sarah, Mark, and Jen. 2 couples, all experienced in winter backcountry travel, all eager for a 2-day escape from civilization. They weren't reckless. All 4 had avalanche training, carried beacons and satellite phones, and even left an itinerary with friends. This was supposed to be routine, beautiful, remote, yes, but manageable. They planned to snowshoe to a high alpine basin, camp for a night, then loop back the next morning. But nature doesn't care about plans. The first day was uneventful, even serene. The frozen world around them glittered with untouched snow, and laughter echoed off the cliffs. They reached the basin just before sundown, pitched their tent near a stand of frostbitten trees, and boiled snow for cocoa. By midnight, the storm arrived. Snow hammered down in waves, and the wind screamed like it was alive. The tent shuddered with every gust, and visibility dropped to nothing. That's when Tyler unzipped the tent, grumbling that he needed to pee. He pulled on his coat, boots, headlamp, and vanished into the white. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. "Ty?" Sarah called, sticking her head into the flurry. No response, only the roar of wind through the trees. She turned back, pale. "I think I heard him," she whispered. "Saying something. I think he's calling for help." Mark and Jen froze. "What do you mean?" She turned slowly. "I heard whispering, like, 'Please, help.'" They threw on their gear and grabbed flashlights. Tyler's tracks were still visible, punched into the snow, veering toward a ridge. They followed them, carefully, methodically, for nearly 300 yards. Then the tracks just stopped, mid-stride. No sign of struggle, no slide, no fall. Just gone. 1 foot in front of the other, and then nothing but wind-blown white. They called his name, screamed it, fired off a flare. Nothing. Shaken, they returned to camp, dread crawling up their spines like frostbite. Something was off. The air felt wrong, heavy, listening. That night, no one slept. At 3:41 a.m., something began moving around the tent. It started with a faint crinkle, the nylon tent walls flexing inward as if something brushed them from outside. Then came the circling, slow, deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Mark whispered, "Tyler," as Jen clutched his arm, trembling. They unzipped a window flap. The storm had eased. Moonlight spilled across the clearing. They saw nothing, but the crunching continued. Around and around. Then it stopped. Dead silence. They barely breathed. Dawn came like a blessing. But when they emerged, they stopped cold. Surrounding their tent in a wide ring were footprints. Barefoot, human-shaped, but wrong. Too long, too wide, and each print had 6 toes. Sarah dropped to her knees and touched one. The impression was fresh. Deep. Warmth had still radiated from the snow. They broke camp in less than 5 minutes, adrenaline overriding exhaustion, packs half-fastened, boots still damp. They began the march back. But they weren't alone. Every so often they heard it, a soft shuffle in the trees above them, something keeping pace, hiding. At one point, Sarah turned, breath freezing midair. There, on the ridge behind them, it stood. A figure, pale, crouched and naked. But this wasn't Tyler. Its skin was a shade of sickly bluish white, like something that had never seen sunlight. It was gaunt, almost skeletal, but moved like it had too many joints. Its arms were long, too long, and its eyes were all black. No whites, just wide, unblinking pupils. It didn't move until she looked at it. Then it tilted its head slowly, like a curious animal, and with a jolt of horror, she saw it drop to all fours and begin scuttling down the rock face like a spider. She screamed. The others didn't look back. They ran. For hours. They didn't stop until the trailhead emerged from the trees like a ghost. A rescue team arrived within the hour after they triggered their GPS beacon. The story they told the rangers was met with frowns, disbelief, snow blindness, hallucinations, grief trauma. They searched for Tyler. No body, no gear, no trace, just a single barefoot print with 6 toes found 400 yards from the camp. The rangers never reported that publicly, but one of them, a rookie, quit a week later. When asked why, he only said, "Something was out there, watching us." The woods weren't empty. Weeks later, another group snowshoeing that same basin called in a report. They had seen a naked man running on all fours through the snow. He dove into a snowbank and vanished. When they searched, nothing was there. No tunnel, no man. But they did find prints. Too big, too long, 6-toed. To this day, hikers still whisper about the Wind River Basin, about the Watcher. They say when the snow falls hard and deep, and the trees groan under the weight of silence. You might wake up to find tracks circling your tent. Too long, too wide, too many toes, and if you look up at the ridgeline, you might see something watching you, waiting, and when it moves, you won't believe it's real until it's too late. Emma and Daniel had dreamed of this day for years, bringing home their baby girl, Lily. After years of trying, fertility treatments, and loss, she was finally here. Perfect, pink, and sleeping soundly in their arms. They had moved into their new home just a month earlier, a charming 1930s colonial nestled at the edge of a sleepy town in New Hampshire. The house was older, yes, but solid. It had that soul Emma loved, original hardwood floors, vintage moldings, a fireplace with old soot stains in the brick. They painted the upstairs bedroom a soft lavender, filled it with plush toys, soft blankets, and a white wooden crib that Daniel had painstakingly assembled. A baby monitor, basic audio only, sat on the dresser beside the crib. It buzzed softly with static, a white noise that lulled Emma to sleep at night, letting her know her baby was safe. But that changed on the 7th night. It was 2:13 a.m. The room was dark, save for the faint green glow from the monitor and the dim nightlight shaped like a sleeping bear. Emma stirred awake, not because of Lily's cries. She hadn't made a sound, but because of a change in the static. The hum shifted. The soft hiss gave way to something more rhythmic, like breathing. Then a voice came through, whisper thin, female, deliberate. Don't cry. I'm here." Emma sat up, ice flooding her veins. For a moment, she thought she imagined it, a dream bleeding into the waking world. But then she looked at the monitor. The green light flickered. Someone was speaking. Someone who wasn't them. She elbowed Daniel awake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He blinked groggily. "What?" "The monitor." Before he could say more, Emma was out of bed, her feet hitting the cold floorboards as she sprinted down the hallway. The nursery door creaked open. The air inside was noticeably colder, not just cool, but sharp, like the inside of a walk-in freezer. Her breath fogged slightly in the beam of the hallway light, but the room was empty. Lily slept peacefully in her crib, undisturbed. The window was shut, locked. No movement. No intruder. No explanation. Emma stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the corners. For a moment, she felt watched. A tight sensation gripped her chest, something primal and instinctual. She stayed awake the rest of the night, holding Lily, waiting for the voice to return. It did. Every night after that. Always between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., always the same voice. "Shh, don't cry, I'm here. You're not alone. I see you. Little one, you don't have to be afraid. I'll take care of you." The last phrase made Emma feel physically sick. It didn't sound loving, it sounded possessive, like a promise. Daniel dismissed it as interference. "Could be a neighbor's baby monitor bleeding into ours," he said. But Emma knew better. The voice wasn't nearby, it was in the room. Intimate, like it was crouched beside the crib, whispering into Lily's tiny ear. They changed frequencies. They bought a new monitor. Still, the whispers returned. Until one night, the voice said something different. "You shouldn't have taken her." Emma was frozen. Then, over the monitor, she heard a sound that broke her. A creaking noise, like floorboards under slow, deliberate footsteps. She bolted into the room again, faster than ever, and this time, the room was not empty. There was an imprint on the rocking chair. Not just that, it was moving, slowly rocking, as though someone had just stood up from it. She screamed, grabbed Lily, and ran back to the bedroom. The next day, they bought the most advanced encrypted baby monitor on the market. A high-end model with two-way audio, thermal imaging, and a signal shield to block outside interference. They also had a security company inspect the entire home. No signs of hacking, no signals nearby, no explanation. Once the new monitor was installed, the voice disappeared. For a while. 2 weeks later, Emma was in the front yard when a silver car pulled up. A woman in her late 60s stepped out. Kind face, nervous eyes. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "I used to live here. A long time ago. My husband and I raised our daughter here." Emma smiled politely. "It's a beautiful house." The woman nodded slowly, then hesitated. "Is the nursery upstairs? First door on the right?" "Yes," Emma said, confused. "I thought so," the woman murmured. "We used that room for our baby too, but we had to move after she turned one. I started hearing things on the baby monitor." Emma's blood ran cold. The woman continued, voice trembling. "Every night at the same time, I'd hear a woman whispering to my daughter, always the same words. 'Don't cry, I'm here.' My husband thought I was losing my mind, but I know what I heard. When we moved, the voice stopped. I always wondered if it stayed behind." She looked up at the nursery window, her face pale. "Has anything strange happened?" Emma didn't answer. The woman nodded grimly, as if that silence was all the confirmation she needed. Then she said something Emma would never forget. "I don't think it's trying to hurt your baby. I think it's trying to replace her." She turned and walked away. Emma stood frozen in the garden, staring up at Lily's window. The curtain moved, just a ripple, but there was no wind. It was late August when Adam and three of his college friends, Maya, Jordan, and Luis, moved into the house on Overton Street. It was a weathered old rental near campus, nestled between overgrown hedges and crooked trees, the kind of place that looked forgotten even in daylight. The porch sagged. The windows groaned in the wind. But the rent was cheap, and they were broke students, eager to start the semester. From the start, the house felt off. Lights flickered. The plumbing wheezed like a dying man. At night, they'd hear soft thumps from the attic or the basement. Just the old bones of the house settling, they told themselves. Still, no one wanted the basement room, so it became storage. Until the 5th week. Adam was alone, cleaning up old boxes when he decided to rearrange the basement. The air down there was dense and clammy, smelling faintly of mildew and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. As he shoved aside a tall wooden shelf against the back wall, he noticed something peculiar. The wall behind it was different. The foundation was concrete all around, except her, where the surface was smooth and painted to match the stone. A hairline seam ran down the middle, like an outline someone tried to hide. Intrigued and unsettled, Adam grabbed a crowbar. The wood groaned as he pried it open. Behind the panel, darkness yawned like a wound in the earth. A narrow corridor stretched into pitch black. The walls were unfinished, dirt packed tight with old, splintered boards. Cold air poured out, carrying the unmistakable smell of rotting earth, and something sweet, like spoiled meat. He called the others down. "What the hell is that?" Jordan asked, already backing up. They grabbed flashlights and stepped inside. The hallway felt like a throat, swallowing their voices. The deeper they went, the quieter it got. Their footfalls were muffled by the damp floor. There was no wind, no sound, just the suffocating silence of a place that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Then they found the room. It was small, 10 feet by 10, with walls and a low ceiling of crumbling wood. The flashlight beams danced over a horrific tableau. Children's toys lay strewn across the dirt floor, an eyeless teddy bear, a headless plastic doll, alphabet blocks arranged into nonsensical words. Moldy finger paintings clung to the walls in tatters, their colors bled into blackness. Stick figure drawings covered nearly every inch, dozens of them, scratched in with nails, buttons, teeth. There was a recurring image in the drawings, a tall, shadowy figure with no face, watching a child cry, again and again and again. In the far corner sat a child-sized mattress, sunken, rotted through with black stains. The smell was stronger here. Something had died on that mattress. And then, Maya gasped. A candle, sitting on a ceramic saucer, melted down halfway. Still warm, its wax was soft to the touch, the wick freshly snuffed. Someone had been here. Recently. Very recently. No one spoke. Then Luis whispered, "Do you hear that?" They all paused. Silence. Then a voice, so faint they weren't sure it was real. It sounded like a child, singing, off-key, from behind them. They turned and ran. Back in the main basement, they slammed the panel shut and shoved the shelf back into place, as if that alone could erase what they saw. Adam called the landlord, demanding answers. The man arrived 2 hours later, sweating before he even entered the house. He went pale when they showed him the wall. I don't know anything about that," he stuttered. "That shouldn't be there. I had the house inspected years ago." Adam asked if there was a history. The landlord didn't answer. His hands trembled. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "You don't want to be asking questions about this place." They moved out that same week, but before they left, on their last night in the house, Adam was alone in his room, boxing up books. At exactly 3:17 a.m., his closet door creaked open by itself. The air turned icy, and from the crack in the floor vent, he heard it again. A child's voice, whispering, "You found my room." He didn't sleep. None of them did. Ever again, not really. 2 years later, Adam found the truth. He tracked the address through county records and found an old article from 1979. The house had once been a private foster home. Several children were placed there over the years. 4 of them went missing. No charges were filed. No bodies were found. The home's owner vanished shortly after the last disappearance. But Adam knew the truth. He had seen the truth. That room wasn't a secret. It was a tomb, a cage, and someone or something was still waiting in the dark. Sarah had always felt safe in her apartment. It was small but cozy, just a little sanctuary she'd created after a long day at the office. It was a quiet, sleepy building, nestled on a side street away from the hustle of the city. No one ever really bothered her. The neighbors were kind but distant. There was always the comfort of being surrounded by walls that had never felt anything but secure. But tonight, as the amber glow of the streetlights filtered through her living room window, Sarah would learn just how fragile that security truly was. It had been a long day at work. Her body ached, and the weight of her exhaustion pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible hand. As she entered her apartment, she closed the door behind her with a soft click, feeling the familiar pull of the night's peace. The lights flickered once, but she didn't think much of it. She placed her keys on the kitchen counter and kicked off her boots, the soles making a dull thud on the hardwood floor. Her cat, Whiskers, a large, fluffy gray tabby, meowed lazily from the windowsill where he had been perched, watching the world pass by. His eyes gleamed in the low light, and his tail twitched, but he didn't come to greet her as he usually did. Something was off. But Sarah, tired and worn out, brushed it aside. She slipped into the bathroom, the warmth of the shower beckoning. The sound of the water cascading over her body soothed her, and for a moment, she forgot about the growing unease. When she stepped out of the shower, droplets of water clinging to her skin, she felt an odd sensation, a subtle, creeping dread that she couldn't shake. The apartment was too quiet, almost suffocatingly so. The steam from the shower clouded the mirrors, and for a fleeting second, Sarah thought she saw something move in the reflection, but when she turned, there was nothing there. She grabbed her towel, drying off quickly, her movements a little sharper than usual. Her eyes kept drifting back to the corner of the room. Something was wrong. It wasn't until she finished drying off and reached for her robe that she saw it. The cat, Whiskers, usually so playful and relaxed, was sitting at the edge of her bed, his gaze fixed on something in the corner of the room. His body was rigid, tail still, ears flat against his head. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, and a low growl vibrated in his throat. The sound was soft, barely audible, but it sent a chill through Sarah's spine. Something was very, very wrong. She froze. Her heart hammered in her chest as her instincts screamed at her to move, to do something, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the cat. And then, as if on cue, Whiskers stood up, his fur bristling, and inched back toward the door. He meowed once, a plaintive sound, before darting out of the room as if the very air had turned toxic. A cold sweat broke out on Sarah's skin. Her breath caught in her throat. Curiosity mixed with a rising dread that threatened to choke her. Slowly, cautiously, she dropped to her knees, her heart racing as she leaned forward and peered under the bed. The darkness beneath the bed was thick, like the air before a storm. Her eyes adjusted, and she saw something, someone. A figure, unmoving, lying face down. A man, his body sprawled out on the floor, hidden in the shadows. His hair, matted with dirt and sweat, was visible in the dim light. The cold gleam of steel caught her eye, the edge of a knife held tightly in his grasp, the blade glistening with an unnatural shine. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. Her mind couldn't process what she was seeing. Was this a dream? A nightmare? but the growing sense of terror in her chest told her this was real. This was no dream. The man's body was unnaturally still, but Sarah could hear his breathing, slow, deliberate. It was a soft, rasping sound that seemed to come from the depths of his chest. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't unconscious. He was waiting. Her blood turned to ice as the truth hit her. He had been here, in her apartment, for who knew how long. And worse, he was waiting for her to fall asleep. Waiting for her to let her guard down, to be vulnerable. Panic exploded in her chest, and she scrambled to her feet, knocking over a lamp in the process. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart pounding in her ears as her body screamed for her to run. Her towel slipped from her shoulders as she darted for the door, but before she could reach the handle, her phone buzzed loudly from the kitchen. She hesitated for a split second. Her only thought was to escape. But her trembling fingers grabbed the phone, dialing the first number that came to mind. "Please, please," she whispered into the phone. "I need help. There's someone in my apartment." It was her neighbor, a woman she barely knew. But the calmness in the other woman's voice gave her a small sense of relief. "Stay calm," her neighbor urged. "I'm calling the police. Just stay on the line with me." But Sarah's mind was in a haze. Her eyes darted around the apartment, the walls closing in. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hide something else. She could almost feel the man's presence in the room with her, even though she hadn't seen his face. The fear clawed at her, tearing away at her sanity. Seconds stretched into eternity as she waited for the sirens, but they never came quickly enough. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the police arrived. They moved through the apartment with swift, practiced precision. Sarah was still frozen in the hallway, her heart hammering as the officers pulled the man from under the bed. His body was stiff, his face pale and twisted into a grotesque expression. His eyes, wide and unblinking, stared straight at Sarah as he was dragged away. His lips parted, his voice a low, guttural rasp. "I was waiting for you to fall asleep." His confession sent a fresh wave of terror crashing through Sarah. He had been there, hiding in the dark, breathing the same air, watching her every move, learning her routines. The knife, still clutched in his hand, was evidence of his deadly intentions. But what chilled Sarah even more was the realization that he had been waiting, not just for her to sleep, but for the right moment to strike. As the officers led him away, Sarah could feel his eyes on her, piercing, cold, and calculating. And as he disappeared into the darkness, the fear gnawed at her. Was this man really gone? Or was he just waiting for the right time to come back, to finish what he started? Sarah didn't sleep that night. Whiskers, who had not returned to her apartment, remained outside her door, his mournful meows echoing in the silence. She had locked every window, every door, and still she could feel him, waiting. The quiet of the apartment, once comforting, now felt suffocating. As the first light of dawn crept in, she knew one thing for certain. Some things, some people, never truly leave. The year was 2003. The internet was still slow, phones still had cords, and most teenagers like Ryan spent their late nights watching horror movies on VHS or sneaking online under dial-up to chat with friends. Ryan was 16, just a normal kid from rural Pennsylvania. He lived with his parents on the edge of town, where the dense forest crept dangerously close to the back of their yard. They never thought much of it, until the calls began. It started on a Monday night, just after 3 a.m. Ryan's cell phone buzzed loudly, jolting him awake. The number was blocked. Half asleep, he answered. "Hello?" There was no reply. Only static, low and distant at first. Faint, like wind brushing over a microphone. He waited, listened. Then it ended. He figured it was a glitch, or a wrong number. The next night, the call came again. Same time, 3:03 a.m. Same number, unknown. This time, the static was louder, almost like it was closer. Still no voice, no message. Just that unnatural crackling that seemed to slither into his ears. By the third night, Ryan didn't want to answer, but curiosity got the better of him. Again, the same static, but it had changed. There was a rhythm to it, a wet, labored sound beneath the static. Breathing, slow, raspy. It didn't sound human. Then came the fourth night. That night, everything changed. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the phone rang again. Ryan picked it up, trembling. And this time, something answered. "I see you." The voice was deep, slow, gravelly. It didn't sound like it came through a speaker. It sounded like it was inside his room, whispering beside his ear. Ryan dropped the phone and screamed. His parents rushed in, turned on all the lights, but the call was gone. The number couldn't be traced. When his father called the phone company the next day, they said no call had come through at that time. No record of anything. His parents thought it was a prank, maybe a kid from school. But Ryan knew better. Because he had started locking his door at night, not because of the calls, but because sometimes while lying in bed after the phone rang, he'd hear faint footsteps outside his window, just one or two, crunching slowly through the grass. Then silence. On the seventh night, Ryan had had enough. He invited his best friend Mike to stay over. They set up a recorder by the phone. They kept the lights off and sat silently in the dark, watching the clock tick toward 3:03. The air felt heavy, unnaturally cold. Then the phone rang. Mike picked up and put it on speaker. The room was filled with the now familiar static. But this time, there was something else layered beneath it. A sound like flesh dragging across wood, like something wet and heavy crawling. Then, the voice. "Open the door." Both boys stared at each other, frozen. Ryan's stomach dropped. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, loud enough to rattle the front door. The boys scrambled to their feet. Mike grabbed a flashlight. Ryan snatched a baseball bat. They crept to the front window and looked out. No one was there, but the porch light flickered, just once, and then died. Suddenly, another knock came from the back door. Ryan's mom screamed from upstairs. His father raced down, shotgun in hand. The police were called. Again, they found nothing, no signs of anyone near the house. But in the morning, when the frost had melted, the truth was uncovered. Muddy footprints, bare, human feet, long, wide, and sunken deeply into the dirt. They led out of the woods, across the yard, to the front door, then the back, then the windows. They didn't lead back to the woods. They just stopped. The phone company still had no explanation. The number had changed every time. One officer even said, "Whoever's doing this, they're not using a phone." The family changed their number. They got new phones, new locks, even motion sensor lights. The calls stopped, but Ryan never really slept again. Years later, he told people he still had nightmares, not of the voice, but of the breathing, that wet, ragged, suffocating noise. And once, during a snowstorm in college, he swore he saw something outside his dorm window, a single footprint in the fresh snow, leading up to the glass, but none leading away.